We are expecting about 350 new airports coming up in the next 15 years or so. The next 10 to 15 years is looking very bright for aviation. India has the biggest order, which is about 2,000 aircrafts coming in the next 10 to 15 years. But some of the failures which have come in, where bringing an aircraft in India and operating it has been a big challenge because
Captain Shivan Bhagvati is the director, founder, and accountable manager of Bativala Bhagvati Flying Charters. A commercial pilot with a deep passion for aviation, he joins us today to discuss investment opportunities in the aviation sector.
How much of a corpus does an investor need if they are looking to invest in aviation?
about 1 to 1.5 CR is enough to start with it.
If I have 1 CR, I want to invest in aviation, what's my next step? What is the investment opportunity when it comes to aviation? Shivan, so let's talk about investment opportunities and aviation as a sector in particular. We've had some amazing success stories in India, and then we've had companies that have fallen flat. What is the investment opportunity when it comes to aviation looking like? Is it flying high or is there turbulence?
So presently speaking, aviation, of course, like a lot of industries, is very cyclic. But at the moment, aviation seems to be flying high a lot. We are seeing some very good demand and a lot of interest from foreign investors, foreign airlines, as well as, of course, Indian investors. And most of this landscape, what is being created is, I believe, a lot of, I think, credit goes to the government presently, wherein they have come up with a lot of different schemes, which I will dive into, which have sort of helped shape this and this vision, which is being implemented from the last few years under PM Sir's vision, has sort of given a very good landscape, and the future in the next 10 to 15 years is looking very bright for aviation. We are seeing such a good inflow of airplanes. So India has the biggest order of aircrafts, which is about 2,000 aircrafts coming in the next 10 to 15 years. We have the largest order book for aircrafts going on presently. And apart from that, we have, with that growth going in, it fuels a lot of different parts, our whole ecosystem. So wherein airports are being developed, we have training schools and training centers called FTOs which are being developed. And that whole thing, including pilots, we have such a steep demand for pilots, where Air India and a lot of other companies as well are hiring pilots left, right and center from wherever you can get them. From instructors to pilots coming in from outside as well. There's such a stark, demand. And there is so much growth fueled also because of the middle class which is growing. They are getting some more disposable income. Aviation, which used to be looked at a lot like a luxury sector, is now being brought in as a necessity.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, I think about it's doubled the number of passengers as well as the number of airports are being doubled. We are expecting about 350 new airports coming up in the next 15 years or so. So looking at all of these factors, it is looking great in terms of that. So where we talk about Viksit Bharat mission by 2047, that has also fueled, and this is a big integral component of the growth for aviation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're familiar with Gift City and how that has brought in such
Yes.
an inflow. So which you mentioned some of the failures which have come in, where bringing an aircraft in India and operating it has been a big challenge actually, because I would say we were not playing with a level playing field with a lot of different countries. So if you see, most of the aircrafts which are being registered are from a lot of airlines and leasing companies are not from India. They are in fact mostly Ireland and other such countries constitute of 2 or 3 constitute of 80%, because you can form a company within like 4 days or 5 days. You can sort of disassemble it and exit that in about 7 days. There are a lot easier laws for leasing. Whereas in India, you have seen with certain, I would say, recent or even previous examples where companies are not wanting to lease machines in India, and it has become a challenge to get them to register them. So Gift City was a very good response. I would see it as for that, which is encouraging it. So there is a single window system wherein now everything can be done. I would say not, of course, in 7 to 10 days, but still a lot better in about maybe 30 to 40 days, I would say, practically speaking.
So you did touch upon the fact that India's aviation sector is thriving. But what if we were to also bring to attention the fact that we've seen past private airlines, for example, Jet Airways, that closed down, private international carrier to shut down after 25 years. There was a case of Kingfisher, separate reasons, of course, Go First. What about all of that? They couldn't even last a few years before collapsing. Aren't there so many concerns around that?
So there definitely are, and of course we cannot have such a sort of green picture saying that everything is now resolved as such. Aviation, of course, comes with a certain risk of its own. You have a lot of, so if you compare a balance sheet, you interview a lot of people in finance, you'll see companies with very strong balance sheets. Whereas in aviation, there could be a company doing a sort of, I would say, turnover of maybe 8 billion, and they have like debt worth 45 billion. So if you see it on paper, that does not make sense. Another reason why is if you talk about financing and aviation financing, is that banks in India do not provide asset-based financing, which is done all over the world. Wherein India, they want a secondary asset. So, example, you want $10 million. So the aircraft has its own value, but that is not recognized here. So that is something which is being worked on now and still not resolved, I would say.
Is that why there's such high debt with a lot of these aviation
so that is one of the reasons why, that is partly one of the reasons why I would say leasing in India also is a little bit more expensive. So a lot of these costs which are associated, USA of course being the mecca of aviation, so technically they have a lot of things, we get a lot of, I would say, stoppages or delays also, which cause extended sort of, you have more costs associated with it. For example, a single part example from my machine, which I have to get in, I have to get it imported from the US. Now they have reduced some taxes, of course, and they are promoting it as well. But still, you have to get that. So there's that delay, the aircraft is grounded, there's additional costs which add up to it. So all of that is something which we have to factor.
So paint a picture for the industry, aviation industry in the US versus in India. How fast is it growing? How much more time till we play catch up? And what are the things that we need in order to improve that?
I would say, of course, the US is a lot ahead, at least presently in aviation sector. We are catching up quite fast, and I think we are taking a more, I would say, a better path to go ahead in that.
Any numbers?
So, example, now I'll give you a comparison of pilots. So, example, we were just comparing license numbers and all of that. So, even a license issued maybe a couple of years back, the US, I think, was a license number of something around 20 lakh or 25 lakh, they have private pilots. But in India, my license number is less than 10,000 for a private pilot, for example. Okay. So there's that stark difference in terms of pilots. In fact, it's funny to imagine in a country of like about 1.5 billion people, I think the total number of CPLs issued till date.
What's a CPL?
So a CPL stands for a commercial pilot's license.
Okay.
Basically, any airline pilot or any commercial pilot which is flying for a commercial activity is a commercial pilot. So these pilots right now is at about 20,000. What do you expect? And that's all of them created from maybe first license issued in like the 1920s or 30s or beyond for the last almost 100 years. So we are really playing catch up on that sector as well. So there's a lot of scope, and that is what people see it in terms of growth for aviation. And we have not even touched upon regional connectivity, which is coming up in India. So that is one very, very, very big one, and which is leading to a lot more growth as well. So a lot of smaller companies are coming in. They are connecting smaller tier 2, tier 3 cities. It comes part of Udan Yojana, which stands for Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik. So that is subsidized flying, which is helping sort of regional growth.
Yes.
You're getting a lot of that is actual real accessible aviation, where per ticket cost is maybe 2,500 rupees. You're connecting cities like, for example, Surat to Amreli, if you talk about. That takes about 8-9 hours or 10 hours by road. Whereas by flight, it's 45 minutes you're connected. So that boosts so much growth in that region. That whole region is landlocked. So, that is something which is great if you go to see. And a lot of difference about, I believe about the number of, I think passengers which have commuted is about 13 million or so through these kind of flights. They have developed about 70 new airports, for this. So they are sort of getting them up to, a good standard, the airports which are already running, increasing the capacity. And then they are also building new greenfield airports, which is every year, I think they have in about 15 years, they have a plan of, I think, about 350 airports. and then they're building super airports, which will sort of be a feeder back and forth for these, then connecting smaller airports and feeder flights. So that whole landscape is really evolving then.
Yeah,
And that in a
absolutely.
big
So
way.
just let's get into the UDAN Open Investment Scheme. If you could just highlight more, because it's a lot about regional connectivity, as you spoke of. What does it currently comprise of? What kind of expansion can it create in terms of investment opportunities, indirect investment opportunities for private investors?
Right. So basically, how I see it. So basically, in UDAN again, as we're developing infra by the government, which is developing, and apart from that, what government is doing is providing subsidized flights. So most of these aircrafts are low seating capacity, relatively high density machines, wherein it's a smaller aircraft, possibly even a single engine or a smaller twin aircraft. They are having anywhere between, maybe some of them even less than 10 seats, to a few more than that, and each of them is subsidized by the government. So example, a cost of operating a certain seat, example we take for maybe a caravan type of machine, okay, that could be maybe about government will pay you per seat for maybe about 13,000 or 14,000 15,000, whatever the X number of figure, which you'll get paid per seat, and the cost to the consumer or the people is about 2,500 rupees. So that brings in a lot of options for them to explore, to use these airports to sort of get that ecosystem going on, and introduce this to people, because that it's for many people it's still a dream to sit in an aircraft. I meet so many of them,
of course.
and so this introduces that idea. This provides that connectivity. It provides a lot of employment in all of these different airports coming in. So that I see it as a big game changer, and the government is really, it is good to see. So I was in fact in a conference last Friday in Ahmedabad, and in that we had of course CM sir of Gujarat, as well as we had our civil aviation minister Ram Mohan Naidu sir. So even he was mentioning this, and I found that very interesting, that about maybe 15-20 years back, you had all of these ministers who were fighting that we want this train going from our city, we want Rajdhani, we want all of this connecting our city, and that's our pride. Now that is happening with aviation. So they're saying we want our airport in our airport to be functional. We want flights connecting it. That is what is happening. So that is really changing it.
An encouraging sign.
Encouraging it, encouraging it. So that mindset is actually more important, I feel, than the other problems that you mentioned. It's that switch is important. Then that is opening up a lot of doors.
So now let's just talk about a private investor who is looking to invest in the aviation space. What is going to be your pitch to them, and why do you think aviation is a lucrative option number one for them? And then we'll get into how to do it.
Okay. I'll give you a few options. So one, the simple, the straightforward you know of, is that you have a few listed companies in India which are into aviation. So example, we have 3 of them. And so you have Interglobe for Indigo, you have Spice, and you have Global Vectra. So you're familiar with the first 2. Global Vectra are neighbors at Juhu Airport. So they are the largest fleet operators for helicopters. So they operate with ONGC, and they have some big contracts. So that's of course one way to get into it. And then we would say more of subsidiaries and companies like GMR, that would be sort of indirectly into airport infra. So that is like the most straightforward way you must have explored in to get into for a smaller ticket size, if people are looking into that. Another option, what we look at is leasing. For example, now a lot of different companies are being formed, suppose through the means of Gift City, and of course companies abroad as well, where investors are purchasing these aircrafts and then they are leasing it. So in terms of lease, example, you would expect, suppose an aircraft costs you, example, $10 million. So the lease rent would be maybe about 1% a month. What you would expect on that machine depends a little bit from aircraft to aircraft, but that's a very rough general figure.
Okay. So what's the argument? Why should I invest in aviation? What are the pointers that you would tell an investor?
So basically speaking, if you look at aviation, so I'll get into that also. So I'll get into what we do as well. So basically, in aviation, example, now we have a certain few niches. This is a market where there exists a lot of monopolies. There exist a lot of different businesses where you require growth in. So example, now what we do is, I'll get into that. For example, there is something known as fractional ownership for machines. So we operate an NSOP. which stands for a non-scheduled operators permit. Basically, it's a non-scheduled airline, you could say. So we operate on demand. So example, in that, we raise investment for a machine, whether it could be through a fractional ownership model, wherein you have 5 investors or 6 investors who put in money for that. They get their own requirement of charters, which they can utilize whenever they want. Essentially, we are an asset management company. We manage the asset for them, for crewing, for pilot, for train, for whatever required around the aircraft, and basically make sure that whenever they want it, the aircraft is ready for them to use. And apart from that, the aircraft gets chartered, which generates revenue for them. So apart from, of course, being a status symbol as well in this case, it also provides a good ROI on that. So you can expect, now depending on the use cases, operations, a rough, I would say, like a ROI would be maybe about 20% on it. And depending on, now example, different segments and businesses, you can expect a lot more as well on these machines.
Yeah, I want to get into the how later, but just the why, if you could just elaborate as to why you think it is a lucrative investment opportunity for an investor.
Okay, so from what I see it, if you talk about how lucrative it is,
In
is
aviation.
for aviation, of course. So one is because of the growth potential what we're experiencing, and I'll tell you about the details about how, but I would say, of course, the amounts and all of that are different. But the ROI one is what you can expect. That is one thing what an investor is looking at all times.
That's via leasing.
That's why
Fractional
leasing,
ownership.
fractional ownership generally. That would be you would say greater ROI on that.
Okay.
And that would be one option. And also because of the government support what we are getting, a lot of the schemes, you are getting paid for, in a lot of different options where they are promoting it, you are getting better margins. In an airline business, what you're doing is, it's fairly more cutthroat if you are investing directly into that. And the idea is to make the cost cheaper for the consumer as much as possible. But in these kind of segments, you are the ones operating. So you have, of course, a little higher margin. You're always 100% full. In an airline, the problem is the load. So example, you're operating a flight from Bombay to Ahmedabad. Maybe it's full. The return leg, for example, is not. So that is where they're losing money. They need a certain about 70%, 75% to break even, for example. So most of these private or these kind of operators, they're always running at 100%.
Okay. So how much of a corpus does an investor need if they are looking to invest in aviation, and what are the different routes of investing?
Yes, so about the corpus, I think you can, so a corpus of even about 1 to 1.5 CR is enough to start with it. So example, we operate, of course, we're into two segments, I'll explain both, but one is into training. So we also operate the oldest flying training school in the country, started by JRD Tata sir, and now it's going to be turning 100 years now. So that is into training model. So we have a lot of, through fractional ownership, that is one route, or we have a lot of leasing companies who provide us with the aircraft. They get a certain ROI on every time the aircraft flies, and as well as even if it doesn't fly, a monthly,
So how would an investor go about it? What do I need to do if I have 1 CR, I want to invest in aviation, what's my next step?
Okay, so basically in this, when I mentioned when your starting point is that, you are looking to invest in something which is a light fixed wing or a aircraft in such of that. So wherein we put together a few investors together, wherein example you have these aircrafts which are starting from maybe about $500,000, which is about, we can take as rough as 5 crores for simplicity. And so you have 5 investors investing 1 crore
in an aircraft.
In an aircraft. And a lot of the times it can be used for their own use case as well. And apart from that, we provide the infra, the setup, the business.
For their own use case, meaning like a private?
For both use cases, depending on the type of aircraft. This model can be scaled then, of course, beyond, ahead. So example, now this is for an aircraft which I mentioned in a budget of, suppose, 5 crores. That is where you can realistically getting starting point. But this can be used for different types of aircrafts as well. So we work with a lot of different big companies and industrialists and businessmen, and we do the same model with them, wherein they utilize the aircraft for maybe about in a month for 10 hours or 15 hours for their own use as well. And apart from that, it can be used to charter, generate revenue for them. That pays off for the maintenance of the aircraft, pays off for their own use of the aircraft, and also then generates a revenue on it.
How do they get revenue with a charter?
So whenever we get a charter, an hourly sum of money will be towards them. So example, we conduct in a month, you can do maybe about, assume 100 hours on an aircraft.
Okay.
So, maybe 20 hours go to them, 80 hours we charter it out.
To others,
Yes,
to the
to
open.
others, yeah. So in that sense.
And how much does it cost to charter, for example? Of course, it depends.
It depends on aircraft to aircraft.
Yeah.
Again, to starting point, maybe only about 60,000 rupees an hour. And then it keeps going beyond, depending on the type of aircraft.
So minimum is 60,000 an hour
Yes,
to charter.
roughly,
Okay.
to charter.
All right. Okay. And what is the kind of average return one can expect when you're looking at a fractional ownership of leasing an aircraft?
So you can expect. Okay, and so now example, if I take a very generalized case, I would expect about anywhere between about 15 to 20% or 25%. But then example now we use it for certain use cases, like you must have heard Char Dham Yatra. So we send some of our machines over there, and in that period they can recover the whole I would say about the third of the cost or fourth of the cost of the aircraft in this 2 months
Okay.
or 3 months. So it depends on how you want to use the aircraft.
Okay.
An aircraft also has a certain life, of course, in terms of hours. So you are essentially selling those hours on a machine.
Can you give me some examples if you're willing to share? You spoke of a lot of like high net investors who put money into aviation. Can you tell me, for example, without of course sharing names, how much they've put in what year, over the years, via what model have they generated, how much return?
So for example, I'll tell you for a light twin machine, for example. So that's a very good machine to utilize. Example, so for like short range charters. So we are into chartering, but we also specialize into short range charters. For example, we connect places like Bombay Shirdi, which takes a long time by road. By aircraft, it takes you about 45 minutes or even less. So we connect those. So within 4 hours, you can do darshan and come back. Surat, a lot of different Pune, Ambi Valley. We connect these places. So in those cases, and we also work with the DOT for doing short flights around the city. So how you must have seen in bigger cities like maybe New York and different cities where you have sky tour. So we do that as well. So when there are smaller aircrafts involved, so we can typically do anywhere maybe about 40 hours to 50 hours a month on that kind of an
So
aircraft.
can you tell me about an investor who's invested via y'all and how much of a return he's made over the next few years via this investment?
Okay, so basically the investment in that case was roughly about, at the time, maybe about €1 million for the
An
machine.
investor put in.
Yeah,
How many
investor
years
put in.
ago was this?
This was maybe about 8 years back.
Okay.
And on that aircraft,
It was for one aircraft to fractionally own.
no, so for that he was completely owning it.
Completely.
It was one investor itself.
Okay.
So they owned it. They
Okay.
used it a lot for their own use cases, for
Okay.
their own. So they
It was
had
someone
different-
overseas, you're saying?
No, Indian investor.
Indian
They wanted to use it, so they had connecting to a lot of different places where they had to go for business
Okay,
as well.
fair.
So they use it for business travel and to their factories and to
Sure,
their different places. And apart from that, they used to charter it for the remaining maybe 70-80% of the month, and they used to get a return of maybe about, I would say, about annually about, I would expect about maybe about 15% or so, 15 to 18%, with considering that they are using it as well.
So they would get it via giving it out as charter.
Giving it
to-
out as charters, and post that they sold that machine, and that was
aircraft,
about
the
the
entire
aircraft, and they got about, the value was about maybe about 80% of it after about using it for 6-8 years.
So the value
6 years.
appreciated and they got...
Yeah, so the value was, I would say it didn't appreciate in this case, but in a lot of the times, the machines which you see, even older, different machines, they actually had a requirement where they had to sell it for
Fair.
yeah,
But why did you say that typically in a car, as we know as an asset, the value depreciates? Why is it that in aviation or in an aircraft, the value is appreciating?
It is a funny phenomenon. Even we were, talking about it previously. So what's happening is, especially the aircraft registered in India, it's a lot easier to acquire and transfer such a machine. So that saves you the time and hassle, of getting an aircraft in. So that is one big factor. One is the demand and supply. So example, you want a specific type of machine, an aircraft suppose which has 6 seats, which is a turboprop, which goes from X to Y, a certain distance, which meets those criteria. There will be like maybe total number of aircrafts which exist would be suppose 5. Out of them in India, maybe there'll be only 2 of them flying. And out of those 2 types, and out of those 2 types, there will be maybe not even one for sale. So
Okay.
that is the
What is the average cost of a charter plane? How many seats typically does it have? And what are the amenities and how high and swanky can it go up till as well? What's the lower end and the upper end for an entire aircraft?
So a lower end, a very, very, very lower
Basic.
end for somebody who just wants to get into it would be about, again, I would say about maybe about 4 to 5 CR
Okay.
on an aircraft. And the sky's the limit when it's then upper
No,
end.
in my lower end, what am I getting? I'm just getting basic seats like
Uh, so,
business
so
class.
a
seat.
lower end. So the advantage in a lower end machine, what you talk about, or something entry level, is not the luxury component of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no.
But a lot of the times, it's the time component
course.
of it.
That's
So,
the
example,
only
you can
reason.
connect two different places very fast
Yeah, of
at your own
course.
convenience at your
But
own
but
time.
what have I got in the aircraft? I've got my how
So
many
they are
seater?
anywhere between. So most private aircrafts will be anywhere between, I would say, about 4 to 6, 4 to 8, or 10 seater.
10 seater.
In that range, because you're traveling
Yeah.
generally with a small group of people.
Yes.
So that would be about a 4 seater, I would say, or 5
Okay.
seater.
And I'm shelling 4 to 5 CR. And what if I'm going the whole hog?
Yeah.
What am I getting? And how much am I paying? Approx.
So see, then there is. I mean, yeah, again, you can just keep going
Of
for it. Like
course,
there are
of
aircrafts
course.
I know which have like
Can you-
a couple of million just on interiors.
Wow.
So, so yeah, that does
Okay.
exist. But I would say something which is like a practical, and you call a big private jet as such. That would cost maybe about 12 million or 13 million or so.
USD.
USD, and
And what am-
probably used in most cases.
And how many seater is that?
That would be about 8 seater.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 or 10 seater, and they can probably fly from India to Europe or something like that. So these are aircraft which are used by big industrialists,
Yeah.
most of them.
Okay.
So this kind of a machine.
Okay, let's talk about MRO, the maintenance, repair and overhaul of the aircraft. As an industry, it's growing quite well at about 8.9%, and it is projected to grow to $4 billion by 2031. Can you tell us a little bit more about MRO, and is it a silent gold mine as an investment opportunity?
So I think you've got that right. So that is one segment in which there is a lot of demand as aircrafts. Again, the whole ecosystem we talk about. So MROs is something which is a silent gold mine. There is a lot of capex involved in it. That is one downside of it. But there are certain players who are really dominating in this field.
Okay.
And a lot of companies which are trying to get into it. So I was part of one for a brief period,
Okay.
which is called Airworks. And they are one of the largest in India. And the kind of facility you see and the size and each hangar can house maybe like 6 huge jets inside. And they have multiple of those. So these, kind of setup, of course, is the main issue with that. We operate a very small scale MRO as well.
Okay.
And or rather, it's more into maintenance for our own fleet, majority. And that is somewhere which is a very good, point to start with.
So are Indian investors receptive to investing in the aviation space? Can you tell us roughly how many there are and how you see that number growing?
Okay, so basically it is in such a space where, of course, PE and family offices are funding certain projects as well, and they understand the potential behind it. And an interesting sort of development is where we had this conference where a lot of different banks also had come in, and they are now actively participating in, of course, the GIFT City model. So Axis Bank is working with Air India to fund their trainer aircrafts, which they're expecting 34 of them coming in. So they are setting up a new base. They are getting into training as well. So that is one. Another thing which I was, I think, just reading yesterday is Mr. Goyal from Zomato he has invested in now a company which is trying to manufacture aircrafts which are 24-seater aircrafts, again for this regional connectivity RCS scheme. Wow. So there are these avenues coming up, different aviation companies coming up.
Now let's talk about drones, because I understand in India there's about 12,000 certified drone pilots. There's about 29,000 drone acknowledgement numbers. Is this an area for investors to tap in on? Is there any way to invest in this? And how do you see drones?
Yeah, so that's a great question and overlaps with a lot of my interests. So I am also a drone pilot, and I'm also a drone instructor, in fact.
Wow.
So I can issue a license for a drone pilot. And a lot of people in media, I think, if you would know of, is, there's so much drone flying which happens where is not technically legal, which is conducted, and it is happening. The government is trying to enforce this in a big way, and there are a lot of breaches of security, in fact, which is not topic to laugh on, in fact. Like in Coldplay, in fact, I don't know if you have read, there were 2 young boys who were flying a drone over the stadium at that time, where you had like about 2 lakh people at Ahmedabad. I was one of them. And these DJI drones, and they were fined, I think, 1 crore. 2 boys, 21-year-old. So that kind of thing. So they have taken it very seriously as a matter of this, partly because of the breach of security. So they have now they want to educate and sort of put this whole system out. So they're
Yeah.
working on it for a very long time. We run an RPTO as well, which is a remote pilot training organization.
Okay.
So and we issue RPCs. So basically, these are certificates for pilots to fly on. Basically, it gives them. It's a very small 5-day course. It gives them an idea of how to fly a drone, what are different components of the drone, what are areas where you can and cannot fly. So India, Bombay, my bad, is almost a fully a red zone. So because of different things like airports around, police stations around, different areas where you cannot fly out of. But this is something which is growing a lot. I think in the next 5 years, the target is to have more than 1 lakh pilots. And this brings in a lot of, with a relatively lower investment, this brings in a lot of opportunities coming up. For example, so for suppose young people who are also not employed as well, so they are doing these courses and they in their own towns and villages, they are spraying with drones. So for agriculture, this has become a big thing, and they are getting paid anywhere between maybe about 500 to 800,000 rupees for 10 minutes of drone spraying in a field, which is about an acre. And that could take a farmer a much longer time. And these drones now are so advanced that you can automate everything from takeoff to landing to where they're supposed to spray. So that accuracy comes in, the time gets saved, the cost is also saved over a long period of time, of course, and you can cover a lot more area at the same time, especially if you have a larger farm.
Yeah.
So that kind of gains are there, and they are recognizing this. So I've spoken to a lot of farmers. You've done it myself, so I get to see that happen.
Let's talk about the underlying surge that we've been seeing in domestic air traffic. For example, a stat indicates in November 2023, there was 4.56 lakh domestic travelers and passengers that flew in a single day. What does this mean for aviation investors in terms of an investable opportunity like investing in airport services or FBO, which is fixed-based operators, or anything with airport logistics?
So in that segment, we already have a big rise. Suppose you talk about, so in suppose from starting to finish, even for any sort of a flight, you have maybe about 50 to 60 people involved, including like in terms of security solutions, in terms of like the different tech for entry in an airport, for flight planning solutions, for from getting an aircraft from one place to another. There is a lot of coordination and a lot of communication and everything involved. So all of these systems see a big growth and a big surge. So from where you see airports developed, so there exists an opportunity in that.
But an investable opportunity?
An investable opportunity. So example, we are presently in a stage where we are now partnering with different companies. So example, there is a Indian company which is so Shakti Group is partnering with Diamond. So they are now manufacturing these aircrafts in India. So they are setting up a base these are very popular aircraft. So setting up a base to provide to flying schools and training organizations. So that can be done. Another thing which is I would say an investable opportunity and scalable as well is, example, you see the edutech space coming up. Generally. So in aviation as well, that is a big industry. To training pilots, the ground school, the ground classes does not require
So how
much
do investors participate in the training of pilots and software, auxiliary services, etc.?
So basically, yeah. So right now there is still no one major player, I would say, which caters to the aviation examination. So this example, how you have government exams, flying also has certain 5 exams plus major exams to cover with radio and everything like that. So there's nobody who has sort of captured it in that sense. It's all very localized, and a lot of is based in Delhi as well. So this is something which edtech or something could also work very well.
Okay.
In that kind of segment.
Now let's talk about the long-term prospects, because given that we're targeting a $20 trillion economy by 2047, aviation is going to play a big part in this. What would be the smartest way for an investor to capitalize on the Indian aviation opportunity, according to you?
According to me, so working with, I think presently working with what the government has laid down, I think we have a lot of opportunities in regional schemes. So I see a lot of different companies and people targeting and building. One is aircrafts which connect smaller airports, 20, 25, 30 seaters. That is, I think, a better space to get into. And that will see a lot more growth, because we have so many airports which can be catered to by them. And before you expect, mobility solutions to come in through drones as such, that is one space. But apart from that, RCS, I think, through that, I think we can see a lot of growth coming in.
Now, let's talk about career paths in the aviation sector. Start off by telling us what are the different career paths that are available and what are the qualifications required for each.
Okay. So the qualifications required, so I'll lay down a few things. So one is pilot training, what we talk about. I'll explain it in detail. The second is you have ground crew and ground staff and cabin crew,
Okay.
which they train for. Second thing is you have degrees for airport management and airport operation roles,
Okay.
which you can have. And apart from that, I can consider drones as also in one of these segments. So these are all different courses laid down. So example, we talk about, and the requirements for it is much less than you expect.
Okay.
For example, for a private pilot, you could guess the age at what you can become a pilot at.
What is it?
So it's 16
What?
for a private pilot.
You're not allowed to drive before
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is for a private pilot. But when you talk about a career opportunity, that
Yeah.
is in a commercial pilot.
Yes.
So you just need to be 18. You need to be medically fit, of course. And apart from that, you require 12th with science. So that is a basic qualification required. The course is for about 1.5 years or so, I would say, inclusive of everything.
And it's in India?
It's
as
in
well?
India, yes, it's in
Are
India.
there courses abroad as well?
There are
or-
courses abroad as well, but I would suggest from what I have seen,
Yeah.
for pilots flying in India,
Yeah.
they have a lot more comfortable. It's like how you learn to
Yeah,
drive
of
in India.
course.
You would prefer,
Okay.
if you're continuing career there.
Okay.
And that is about 1.5 years or so of a course. It is you have to clear your government exams as well, and that includes about 185 hours of flying at a single engine and 15 hours on a multi-engine.
Okay.
So that enables you to then fly. You can fly for the airlines. You can fly commercially in any sort of commercial ops.
Okay. What about, you were talking about the other three avenues, which is the airport staff and, the aircraft crew.
So
What would be
basically,
the qualification?
So basically, for all of these, there are most of them. So example, if you see airport operations, and many of them are master's courses. So that's beyond your basic graduation. You can do it. And for cabin is also after 12th. So that is a basic course. And all of these things exist. In terms of drones, the courses are even more simplified. For somebody who wants to get into it, it's a 5-day course. So
And you've done it?
I have done that. And then I've done an instructor and a few other courses on that. But for somebody who wants to, get into drone flying, and you can work on contracts, government contracts, and a different, of course, privately testing, all of that, is only a 5-day course, including flying, training, as well as theory. And it covers a lot of, in fact, basics of your, like basic flying aerodynamics as well.
Okay. What about the process? What is it for obtaining a commercial pilot license and a private private pilot license?
So I'll give you like a comparison of sorts. A private license, just to explain, a PPL is a private pilot's license. It would take maybe about, depending, so it's mostly carried out by people who are doing it for a hobby, or they are doing it for interest in aviation.
Okay.
So that is a 40-hour course, 40 hours of flying. And the remaining is your classes, what you have, which will consist of a little bit more basic theory as compared to a commercial pilot. A commercial pilot flies for about 200 hours, which is 5 times as much. The costing of it also would reflect in a similar manner. A private
Which is
pilot,
how much approx?
A private pilot would be about anywhere between maybe 8 to 10 lakhs.
Okay.
Whereas a commercial
Commercial?
pilot would be about 45 lakhs or so.
Okay.
In that.
To put
Basically,
in.
that's the chunk of your flying training. So each hour of your flying training would cost anywhere between, depending on the school, maybe 20,000 to 25,000 an hour. So you can do the maths.
Okay.
And so that is one.
And what about, is there any additional training or licensing or certification that's required?
So this enables you to then take up further. So example, it's not like driving where you have one license and you can drive every car. Here you get rated on a certain aircraft, and then you have to additionally do it based on 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, whatever the requirement. You have to do those to then get qualified to fly different aircrafts. So you're always in a learning sort of a process.
Fair. So for the commercial pilot, the basics, can you just tell me, how much does one have to actually shell out for their certifications, their flying time, the education as well?
So basically, it is
Approx?
approximately about 45 lakhs to
Okay.
50 lakhs,
Okay,
what
yes.
we are
You
expecting.
said that.
And yes, and apart from that, there are also now BSc courses. So most of the time what happens is pilots have done their 12th. Whereas now these courses are involved, sort of introduced by Mumbai University, where you can do simultaneously a course as a pilot for 3 years, which is 6 semesters, a standard BSc program, where you're also a degree holder then, which is preferred by a lot of airlines when you're going foreign, and all of that as well.
Any scholarships, any sort of government schemes or any sort of financing options that are available for those who want to be trained as commercial pilots?
So there do exist a few. If you qualify for the same, you do get subsidized flying costs. You have government flying training schools as well. So they do it at a lower cost as well. So the range of it could differ a little bit. I would say plus minus about 20%.
Okay.
Also that kind of thing.
And what is the starting salary of a pilot roughly on a domestic, and how much and how long does it take to go up?
So basically, when
You start off as a co-pilot.
you start off as a so it maybe a little bit more detailed would be as a supernumerary, as
Okay.
basically something like you're observing things and
So
you're
how
understanding
much do you
things.
get paid
So that is a bit more like a stipend basis. So
Okay.
it could be depending on the airline, maybe 50,000 or so plus.
Okay.
Then that is for a few months maximum. All of these stages depend on an individual,
Okay,
even with
fair.
the flying. In all of these exams, the passing percent is about 70% because you won't want your pilot, if you're skipping modules maybe. So that is one, and
So you start off with 50K.
and that is for a very short period. A co-pilot would get paid anywhere between maybe about 2 lakh to 3. So you have ranks in that as well. So a junior first officer, you have a senior first officer. So maybe about 2 to 3.5, about 3.5 lakh, depending on the airline, of course. If you're going for a foreign airline, you would probably expect even 10, 15%, 20% more. And for a captain is anywhere between, I would say, about 5 to 6.5, 7 lakh. And then depends again on the aircraft, but a generalized figure. Then again, after captain, you can have, you're an examiner, an instructor who's flying. So that keeps going up.
And how much flying time are you required to do as a pilot roughly in a month?
So in a month, it might sound quite less when you talk about Narayan Murthy talking about doing 70 hours a week. Here you're flying mostly 70 hours a month.
Okay.
Yeah, so about in an airline,
That's your minimum.
So minimum contract generally about 40 hours. So you're doing anywhere between 40 to, I would say, on a very higher side, about 90 hours realistically. So it's in that range.
And it can be broken up and...
It is broken up. So we, in a good way, we have an FDTL, so flight duty time limit. So everything is monitored from the time I enter the airport. There are a lot of processes. So we enter, we have a doctor see us, make sure we're fine. We do a BA test. We then want to go and conduct the flight. So everything is monitored of how many hours you've flown, how, your travel time is also counted in that, so that you're well rested and you're not fatigued.
Yes.
So that is the idea, to maintain safety in operation. So you have a daily limit, you have a weekly limit, you have a monthly limit, you have an annual limit. So everything has to be in check, of course.
And for long haul flights, how does it work for the pilot in terms of the number of hours that he's required to fly the plane?
So there have been even changes in that recently also to make it even better for the pilot. So example, for long haul flights, you generally have 2 set of crews. So they switch, so you have a cruise captain and a cruise co-pilot, which they switch, post landing
After
takeoff.
how many hours?
So they split it based on, their thing, but about first few hours and the last few hours is handled by, and it's split that way. And then they also get rest there. So if they're flying for a 16-hour or 18-hour flight, they'll have 3 days of, layover or rest period in that. So that is all very well controlled, and that is a very good thing in aviation that way. So that there's no fatigue, and, there is we understand the effects of fatigue. So that's really taught in some of our subjects.
And you also spoke about other opportunities like engineers, trainers, air traffic control, aircraft maintenance. What are the other lucrative career options in aviation?
So we talk about, engineering is also another big one, because we see in terms of pilots, you have a shortage of pilots specifically on a lot of types of aircrafts as well. So it's very tough to sometimes find a pilot for a certain specific machine you're looking for, which is qualified. You have to train them, or you have to it takes a long time, which, is also a little bit of a hindrance. So that is one. Engineers to find is very difficult as well. So, engineers who are rated on certain different types of machines, what you're looking at, especially in private or general aviation, we call it, in this segment, apart from looking at the airlines, there is a scarcity of those. So there is a lot of scope in that kind of a field as well.
What about concerns like soaring ATF prices, pilot shortages, safety concerns, all of that, and it being such an expensive proposition for aviation? What would be your take on these concerns?
This ATF prices is something which is a good point, wherein in the last post-COVID as well, we are experiencing a lot of, I would say, costs associated with it. But yes, that is one. And so basically, in terms of so we also have a lot of pressure when we talk about pilot shortages as well. So Air India is also setting up a FTO or a flight training organization where they are going to train their own pilots as well. Indigo we are working with in certain aspects where we are training and helping them convert pilots. So that is building in the back end. So they have, we have a whole thing in process. So there are, of course, I cannot deny there are a lot of things which are going on in the industry, but there is already a plan in action put forward, I would say about many years back, and now we'll see the effects of it in the next few years. So I have a positive outlook on that.
Since you mentioned that it does come with a lot of risk, you need a fairly decent corpus to even think about investing in aviation. What would you say is the temperament of an investor looking to invest in aviation?
Passionate about the field as well, and you need to be patient about it as well. Yeah.
Okay, passion and patience. Thank you so much. It's been really eye-opening, understanding a lot more about investing in the entire aviation space, which you say is flying high. Lots of key takeaways from this episode. The fact that the aviation industry in India is certainly flying high. There's a lot of interest from foreign as well as domestic investors, but you need to have a fairly strong risk appetite to invest in this space because there's a lot of risk and high debt and high costs as well that come with it. But there have been a lot of support from government with a lot of schemes like Udan, etc. The fact that we are seeing the domestic passenger travel having doubled in the last 10 years is only a sign of promising things to come. And you can invest via companies that are looking at leasing. There's also fractional ownership, so it's not a whole lot of burden on your wallet. And now we are seeing the advent and more growth of a lot of aircraft leasing companies in the country. So it would be interesting to understand, would you look at aviation as an option to invest in? Do let us know in the comments section below. Do remember to hit that subscribe button to Personal Finance TV, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in.